I know it sucks to have to wrap it up a little bit early, but hopefully this will lead to more interesting conversation in breaks and in the breakout groups. Wow. All right. Okay, so just to wrap it up, I wanted to take maybe the next 10 or so minutes to hear from you all, either reflections on how that went, what felt comfortable, what felt uncomfortable, where are you struggling, if folks want to share ideas that they came up with, how they started applying some of these concepts. Really open forum here, but just wanted to take some time to debrief, because like we said, it's easy to come up with a purpose statement. It's hard to start putting it into action and to actually practice. So yeah, open forum. Who wants to start? All right, saw your hand go up first.
A general grant opportunity. You're looking for a new partner you want to work with. Thank you very much.
There we go. This approach, these 5+9, you could just take the word company and put project. Mm-hmm. And to me, in my mind, I see this, and this could be applied to the next grant opportunity for you go for, because a reviewer will say, well, do you have a defined purpose? Do you have a defined outcome for your project work? Do you have your defined societal issue you're looking to solve? Have you defined critically what your resources are to make that happen? And have you defined the assets that you're going to develop afterwards? So the Purpose Playbook, people should be using this to write research grants, because you're going to tick all the boxes of what a reviewer wants to see. So It's a general comment to the playbook itself.
I love that. The comment we got yesterday, or the question we got yesterday from Chancellor about have we worked with educational institutions. Sometimes, our organization works with foundations. We also work with companies. Sometimes we work directly with nonprofits. And there's sometimes a false divide between those sides of, the folks working with companies must only believe, in certain things, and the folks working with foundations and nonprofits may, only believe in certain things. But there's a lot that is applicable and that companies should do learning from foundations, nonprofits, and the vice versa as well. So I appreciate that. Thank you. And I think Brian is wandering around with a mic, although I'm happy to do that too. I didn't get my steps in yet today.
Onboarded some new team members, and I think this is a great exercise to make sure that everybody is aligned with this is the purpose of our organization, or what methods, or if they even have new ideas, new thoughts, but at least from a vision standpoint, I think this is a really good exercise.
Awesome. Thank you. Who else wants to comment? Kai.
So a comment, but then a question. The comment is that we discussed, and it seemed to resonate, this idea that if you're really choosing to engage in a really important purpose, you probably are engaging in having to change the world in some way. And so that third area of how you do shared value, or you talked about you really got to engage in the ecosystem, is really, I look at that as not one of the choices. It's almost like if you're going to be purpose-based, you're going to be doing that.
That's
and
awesome.
If you're probably not doing that, you're probably not actually engaged in a very powerful purpose, I think. But here's the question for you, because this came up in our discussion. I'm really struggling with the continued overlap between values, because there's a lot of values-based ethos around, particularly Native corporations, tribal organizations that we have in Alaska. We really want to embrace those values. And shared value, which is really a completely different issue.
It is.
Which is creating your business going to also creating a better business also going to create a better world? It's that external impact that's different than creating the internal business impact. And how do we sort this thing out so we don't keep having this conflation?
Only we had a different word.
Well, that's where I'm going. That's where I'm going. That's my question is, do you run into this, and how do you keep people straight on not getting wrapped up in values and missing the opportunity to engage deeper in shared value?
We had a similar question yesterday, right, of why shared value instead of shared values? And again, this is probably not the Michael Porter, Mark Kramer, prescribed answer, but they're not here, and they're very loosely involved in FSG now. So, I'm happy to comment. I mean, I don't feel so strongly that, like I said, we just helped codify some things, right? Things that were already being done in business, help codify, help trying to advance it a little bit. And so they named it shared value because they were really thinking about bringing economic value and social value together, right? That is separate from the values that will help run your organization, but it needs to be grounded in that. Your purpose, when we talk about being authentic, when we talk about being all those different attributes, it needs to be grounded in your values. I wouldn't, frankly, when we work with companies, we do run into it. We get the question of how do we distinguish between those things, or is that going to confuse people? And we really like to say, focus on the concept, the underlying things that shared value is trying to get you to do. If you find that calling it shared value is confusing people because you really want to start every meeting by talking about your values as an organization, then don't call it shared value. But know that that's the philosophy that you're applying, and it's okay to move away from those two words. But just worry about the actual thing that you're underlying trying to do and apply that. Some people then decide to say, okay, well, we're going to really make sure that we have a virtuous cycle that happens between the impact that we're trying to create in the world and the business, and they focus on that instead. So does that help? All right, I'm hearing a lot of, so that was a good one because that was a challenge. I want to hear other challenges. What parts of this, I'm going to be very impressed if everyone went through this activity and thought it was a breeze.
I've spent most of my life in the nonprofit world. And most nonprofits begin with the idea that they are purpose-driven. They are going someplace, and they've agreed on where they're going. And over time, the resources available to them, which generally they can't generate themselves, change. And so their purpose changes. And what I see in this model with businesses is they try to keep that same purpose and generate the revenue through their products. So I struggle with how to think about this in the nonprofit world versus the profit world, where sometimes your purpose chases dollars.
Yeah.
And it's hard over a 20-year period or a 10-year period for a nonprofit to stay on the purpose that they began with because their resource stream changes. And so as I was going through this exercise, I was trying to apply that in my head. And sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't in my head. So anyway, that's sort of my statement and or question.
Yeah. I'm curious, to others, does that come up for others? Does that resonate? Thank you, Brian.
Well, one of the things I've been playing around with is how, as a nonprofit or coming from the nonprofit place, I could approach a corporation or a business and have them embrace my purpose as their shared value and have the right resource advantage from that, and so I work with a lot of developmental disability providers. They're struggling with resources and they're struggling to have inclusion happen, and there's this value that people with disabilities can bring to a business, and a business who says we believe in an inclusive world and we're going to walk the walk and we're going to show you by employing people with disabilities, but we're also going to be a corporate sponsor for the Alaska Association of Developmental Disabilities, which is the organization I direct. And, so I was kind of trying to reverse that of how can nonprofits leverage the corporate need for shared value?
Okay. All right. I'm going to try to answer both of these. To your question, I think it's a really important one because you're right, and I've seen this, and that in nonprofits you often define a mission, purpose, and then you feel that you end up chasing the dollars a bit and you end up having mission creep, right? Or you get so a grant that you receive from a funder has really strict reporting requirements, or they really want you to pursue X program, and so you do it. And so I think it's a couple of things. One, how does your purpose guide decision making, right? Are you finding ways to hold yourself accountable in that? But also this notion that, what are there activities that are if they're gonna take you so far away from your purpose, I would say that's probably something you don't want to do. But are there activities, and this applies for nonprofits and for-profits, right, that are sort of in that purpose neutral zone? Maybe they're not super aligned to your purpose, but they're not against your purpose. They're not counter to your purpose. And by taking them on, may they actually enable you to do things towards your purpose in a better way. So is it a grant that's going to enable you to hire additional staff that may be slightly focused on, or half their time is focused on the program that's sort of purpose neutral, and the other half can help build capacity to do something that is more purpose positive? And sort of similarly in an organization, what are you thinking about? And if it's not, if you have a really hard time answering that, then I think, there's a question about, do you need to revisit your purpose of, thinking about it's changed over time because of the conditions in which you're operating in, or, make the tough choice. Strategy is all about choices. And one thing that we didn't talk too much about in this is that it's very hard to narrow. I'm curious how many people, as they went through this exercise, kept adding on things that they could do, which is great, but you can't do everything at once. So when we work with our organizations, we also often tell them, hey, you need to make some tough choices. What are you going to focus on now? What are you going to focus on later? And what actually don't you want to take completely off the table because you don't want to spread your resources too thin? The other question, I thought that was excellent, because we find in this space that companies sort of often approach, and again, I recognize that I typically work with a much larger organization, but companies sort of have this mentality, and I think I see this in smaller companies as well, of we can do everything ourselves. And they have these bold ambitions, but they actually can't. It's not just that they don't sometimes have that capability, they could certainly hire the capability, but they often don't have the experience and the trust, right? With the ambitious, in your situation, right? With what does it actually mean to understand, how to live with a disability and what the kind of services they need. The other thing, though, I think that, I find that companies aren't always thinking about, but perhaps should, and I suspect that this may resonate with smaller organizations here, is this concept of what we call targeted universalism. So sometimes, I'm seeing some head nods, so I like that, but I'll explain it just in case you aren't familiar with it. It also goes by the curb cut effect. So it's this idea of, by solving a problem for a very specific population, but making it applicable and available to everyone else, can you actually advance your value? And I think that's a little bit getting to your question. So the way this came about, or the curb cut effect and why it's nicknamed that, is that when, a long time ago, a lot of sidewalks used to sort of be right angles, and they didn't have the curb down that allows that. So when sidewalks sort of went that, it was really designed thinking about how will people with wheelchairs be able to, or other disabilities, be able to use sidewalks. And so it was designed with that target population in mind, but it wasn't only available to that. We all use sidewalks. And now the curb that you see, both the curve and the ramp down, helps so many people, right? It helps people with strollers. It helps, it has reduced number of traffic accidents because it's not as sharp of a turn and brushing against that curb. So thinking about that and bringing that to organizations as well, of you may think that this is a very small population that doesn't actually affect you that much, but by solving for that, you can actually help many more people as well. I also saw somebody here at this table had a hand up. But.
Something that came up in our group was the top-down prescription of values and purpose that may or may not resonate with everyone that they're impacted by. So I guess I was curious if you had advice or thoughts on how to update your values and your purpose based on input and engagement from those who are directly impacted by it.
Yeah. Yes, 100%. I would think back to me, a good example is what Sarah shared yesterday, right? The deep stakeholder engagement that they did of going out there and really thinking about who their community is, who are not just who their community is, but in different organizations, the problems that you're trying to address. Do you have folks with that lived experience in your radar? And when you think about how you do stakeholder engagement, how you do things like a materiality assessment for your organization, actually engaging those. More often than not, you're right, it's top down or it's a very limited sample set. And so really expanding that view to get that deeply in there. So, yeah.
Hello. I cannot speak for the group, but when I balked at the word "the world will" and said, "What do we mean by the world?" I think that led to some interesting conversation around the table. Is it all the people in the world, or is it all the organisms in the world? And when we say world will, I hope the world will survive the 6th mass extinction, the anthropocentric age. We have to take care of the bacteria and the viruses. There's millions of them as well. So I want to share an innovation story with you. When I was gripped by this 6 years ago, before Trump, and I said, we need more loyalty to the earth. I went to Bill Spear and said, Bill, we need a new earth pin. So he designed one, and he said, sorry, the minimum order is 1,000. What do they cost? Well, he said about $3 each, wholesale, of course. He said, we'll keep 200, you buy 800. That's $2,400 worth of earth pins. And I've given away almost all of them. It's cheap insurance. We pay thousands of dollars a year just to insure our stupid cars. I paid $3,000 to try to insure a little life insurance for the planet. So just innovation, basic stuff.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
He's going to auction that pen off later for fundraiser.
Maybe one last question, comment, and then we'll wrap up.
Well, lucky me. Thank you.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm hoping to piggyback on some of the conversations coming from the nonprofit people. So I'm here representing a group that originated in the nonprofit world. We worked in affordable housing, but we intentionally left it to try and get into the startup world, which we perceived as being more nurturing of innovation. And that is something that is, from our experience, one of the most needed things in affordable housing. It's just we need innovative solutions. But we're noticing that there's sacrifices by making that move, and specifically the support and the infrastructure of the nonprofit worlds for non-profitable purposes. So at least our team, we're really not interested in making a profit. It's never been our goal. And a lot of the profit models that we're being exposed to are things that we would absolutely just want to avoid, like locking up IP or exploiting the demand with markup on our products. We don't want to do any of that. And so I guess our question is, what is the business model for us? You know, we're trying to make as large of an impact without needing profit as a resource to do that. And we're trying to shuffle off, I guess, some of the constraints of the other business models, nonprofit worlds, that prevent doing that meaningfully on a big scale, on a timeline. But we're not really seeing an easy path forward. So I'm just curious what your thoughts on that are.
Yeah, that's you all definitely don't ask the easy questions. I mean, that's a tough one for sure. I actually don't know enough about the affordable housing space to I think, properly answer that, if I'm being very honest. And I also feel like I need to learn a little bit more about what exactly they're trying to do. So maybe we can have an offline conversation about that in the break. Cool.
We have one more.
Okay. I mean, I can go all day, but you all have a schedule.
Okay, I'll be really quick because that question is very similar to what you had just asked. Thank you. And so I will do offline as well.
Okay.
But the question very quickly is, this whole thing is designed obviously with economic value for the entity. Yeah. So my question is, what happens, because when you're trying to solve social and environmental problems, it costs the company, right? What happens when the purpose comes in conflict with profits?
Okay, that one I can answer. I mean, again, look, at the end of the day, we recognize that this, you know, it's a sort of false way to frame it that everything's a win-win, because you're right, there are some things that will come at cost to a company. And I think it's also recognizing, okay, where are those investments, those costs that are needed? What of those can you as an organization take on versus and maybe this is getting a little bit to your question too. What can you take on versus where are there, as Kai was saying, larger pieces in the wider ecosystem that you need to partner with others to take on? And so, for example, the Gates Foundation likes these sort of shared value, purpose, social enterprise, likes funding them. Often they start as nonprofits, sometimes they start as for-profits, and then they might switch over. But what they recognize is that there are some wider pieces in the ecosystem, and so what they'll do is they'll subsidize some of those by grants and make those investments to help with that. But they also carefully evaluate, and this is, happens in other companies too, of what are things that you're just going to have to do at cost, right? You're going to have to take on the cost, and hopefully down the line, other investments that you're making will ultimately mean that that you come out, profitable. And often when we do shared value strategies with companies, we say, don't expect immediate profit because you're doing something different. So sometimes it takes a couple of years, sometimes it takes 5 years to actually really turn that profit over. But then hopefully at that point you're starting to see some of those economies of scale that you actually then start to recover those costs quite a bit. And anybody, you all know this very well because many of you all work in the energy space or in things that require a lot of heavy investment. But even on the healthcare side, you see that, right? You make deep investments in R&D, and only a few of those actually pan out to be things that you take to market and then end up helping you recover those costs. So. All right. Well, I'll be here for the rest of the day and happy to chat offline. Thank you all. And if I would ask you to take away sort of one thing from this session is just to start. Start putting this into practice. It can feel overwhelming, it can feel daunting, but just start somewhere. And hopefully the playbook can be a helpful tool. Some questions to nudge you along. Remember that it's not just about defining a purpose. It's not just about even defining a strategy. You have to sort of do the full set of things because those just help you start. So yeah, that's it. Thank you all.
So awesome listening to smart people talk, isn't it? It's just the best. Nikhil, Bumb, thank you so much. That was great, really. One more time, really appreciate everything you had to say there. So interesting. Okay, we've got a little bit of a transition happening here. So there's a few details to just pay attention to because some things we had a little bit of a switch on some meeting room stuff. So first, I want to thank everyone for have everyone thank IGA and The Grind for the coffee and breakfast sponsors. They were very needed, so thank you for that. We're going to go into now round 2 of the innovation shorts, and in case you missed round 1 yesterday, these are 10-minute kind of TED Talk type presentations from innovators just like you. And we have 2 rooms and 4 presentations that'll be happening back to back. And then this is what's to kind of pay attention to here. We'll be in the same rooms yesterday. That's room 104, the media classroom, and then room 222, the Glacier View room. The power of new technology and science is one subject, and that's going to be in room 222, the Glacier View room. And preparing for a green future is going to be in room 104. That's the media classroom. So you got to choose your room, and then you meet us back here in 1 hour for lunch and a chance to see a master carver at work as well on a totem pole right here in the beautiful UAS campus. And just very quickly, a little bit of a brief on lunch is we have to confirm, do you have more on the lunch, Brian, that you wanted to, you have to turn that mic on real quick.
I have just a little bit to add about the special opportunity we have about carving. So we have this opportunity to witness a master carver, and it's not going to be here because I don't know exactly where on campus. Last time I saw it, it was down at Oak Lake. It's Oak Lake. Okay, so it's there are too many of us to go all at once. So during the lunch, we want you to, as soon as the shorts end, those that are ready to go, come here. We'll make a group before you eat your lunch, and we'll take you to spend 10-15 minutes to observe the master carving, and then we'll start sending groups over there because we're guessing everyone's going to want to spend a few minutes watching this carving happening. Okay, so we're going to leave it at that. So at 12:15, that's the come here, grab lunch, and if you want to be the first ones out, come to the stage, and we'll walk you out the door and to the carving in groups.
And then just one more time, the power of new technology and science, that's in room 222, the Glacier View room. and Preparing for a Green Future is in room 104, the media classroom. So choose your rooms and have a great time listening to the Innovation Shorts.